City of Placerville Planning Commission meeting to order. It's a regular meeting, Tuesday, May 20th, 6 p.m. Would everyone join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to ask that staff conduct roll call.
Chair Lowry.
Here.
Vice Chair Drobish.
Here.
Member Friend.
Yes.
Member Russell. Here. Member List.
Here.
Thank you. Does anybody want anything pulled from the consent calendar today?
Move to adopt.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We're now to items of interest to the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the Commission on any matter not on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. State law prohibits the Commission from acting on items not listed on the agenda except by special action of the Planning Commission under specified circumstances. The Chair reserves the right to limit the speaker's time to 3 minutes. The Chair will recognize the speaker and ask that they state their name for the record. Personal attacks on individuals or comments which are slanderous or which may invade an individual's personal privacy will not be tolerated. So it doesn't appear that we have any public discussion of matters not on the agenda, so we'll move on to communications from staff.
We have none this evening.
Thank you. That brings us to public hearing item 7.1 for 1750 Broadway, the Mercy Way Rescue Church Conditional Use Permit, CUP 2012-03, revocation. The Planning Commission will conduct a public hearing for consideration of revocation of CUP 2012-03 in accordance with City Code Section 1036D. The CUP authorizes the operation of a mission and church within the highway commercial zone. A project that is disapproved or rejected is exempt under Section 15720 of the California Environmental Quality Act. Our project lead is Mr. Pierre Rivas, and
I have to recuse myself. I have property nearby. Thank you.
thank you, Les. So I'll now turn it over to Pierre.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. Again, this is a hearing to consider the revocation of a conditional use permit, CUP 2012-03 for the Mercy Way Rescue Church, currently located at 1750 Broadway. I'm going to start with just a little background. On December 4th of 2012, the Planning Commission considered the conditional use permit for the Mercy Way Church. At that time, the Planning Commission voted 2-2 on a motion to approve the application. The tie vote results in a no decision, and therefore it was a default denial of the application, which then automatically was forwarded to the City Council for action. The Council considered the application at their January 8th, 2013 hearing and conditionally approved the use permit. On May 6th, 2014, that was at your last hearing, the Planning Commission held a public hearing to consider scheduling a public hearing date for revocation of the conditional use permit, the subject of this hearing. The Planning Commission found that the applicant had not satisfied all the conditions of approval necessary to operate a church facility within the existing building, and therefore directed staff to schedule a public hearing for consideration of revocation of the conditional use permit. To give a little background about the facility, the Mercy Way Rescue Church operates within an existing building located at 1750 Broadway. The approximately almost a half-acre site contains 2 buildings. The existing 968 square foot single-story building, which was formerly a Greyhound bus terminal and was also formerly used by the Tijuana Taqueria restaurant, which is located next door at 1762 Broadway and operates on the adjoining approximately 3,000 square foot building located directly to the east. Vehicular access to the site is from Broadway, and the entire frontage of the site is paved. The building is utilized for Christian-based church worship services scheduled 3 days per week, including Bible study, and is a counseling center for disadvantaged populations within the community, including the homeless. Originally, the facility did serve as a shuttle bus stop for the Interfaith Rotating Winter Shelter, which runs from November through March. The building the building includes a sanctuary room, storage building with shelves, bathroom, and a counter with a sink. You have in your package the staff report that was prepared for you at your last meeting, which contains much detail involved in staff's recommendation for revocation of the permit. So I'm going to be a little shorter this go around and concentrate on just basically the 3 conditions where the applicant has failed to comply. So in the discussant section, following staff's review of the status of each condition of approval, in accordance with the condition 4, staff has concluded that the applicant has not satisfied conditions 2A, 6D, and 8 as discussed in the staff report, and I'll go over those briefly. Condition 2A basically states that the facility shall be limited to a maximum occupancy of 20 at any given time due to parking availability pursuant to the zoning standards unless building or fire codes require a more restrictive occupancy limit. The occupancy limit may be increased up to a maximum of 49 by the Director of Development Services upon submittal, approval, and installation of a detailed dimension alternative site plan, providing for a minimum of 1 parking space for every 4 seats pursuant to the parking requirements set forth in the zoning ordinance. Parking shall not overlap or conflict with staging, loading, and maneuvering areas for the shuttle bus. This is staff's analysis. The facility is currently permitted as a Group B occupancy, and what that means is within the building they could use it for what's termed skill development use and has a current maximum occupancy limit of 8. A church would need to be permitted under an assembly or Group A occupancy. The building is served by a single exit and cannot be utilized as a church facility because it cannot meet building code requirements for an A occupancy. Group B occupancy, however, allows for counseling, training, Bible study, etc. These uses may continue within the building as permitted. The church component of the project necessitating the requirement for a conditional use permit is no longer required. And I want to make it clear that we're not saying that the building or the facility can't be a church. It's just that the applicant has not been able to modify the building in accordance with the building code such that it can be used as a church or an assembly type facility. Conclusion, since the applicant has not made necessary improvements to the building for a Group A occupancy, the building cannot be used as a church, and this condition has not been satisfied. Moving on to condition 6D. The necessary improvements to the building and property as required by the building permit and all conditional use permit conditions of approval shall be completed with approved inspections within 60 days of the permit issuance unless extended due to extenuating circumstances by the Director of Development Services. As of staff's site inspection, which was conducted on April 21st of 2014, the applicant has not satisfied the following: 1, construction of a garbage dumpster enclosure, and 2, removal of the temporary banner sign and replacement with a permanent sign. In addition, since the building was permitted as a Group E occupancy, a church facility is not permitted use in the building under the California Building Code. The single-story building with a single exit currently has a maximum occupant load of 8 persons. In conclusion, the applicant has not satisfied this condition. With respect to condition 8, the final one, a screening enclosure for refuse and recycling containers shall be designed and constructed to the satisfaction of the Development Services Department. Site currently has 2 refuse dumpsters and 1 waste, fats, and oils container, none of which are screened within the required enclosure. In conclusion, the applicant has not satisfied this condition. So it is the recommendation of staff at this time that the Planning Commission take the following action regarding conditional use permit 2012-03 and make the following findings. The applicant was unable to modify the building to meet the requirements of an assembly or Group A occupancy as required by the California Building Code for a church, therefore not permitting an assembly or church use within said building. 2, the applicant has not constructed the required refuse dumpster enclosure. 3, the applicant has not replaced a temporary banner sign with a permanent sign. And then staff is recommending in number 2, revoke conditional use permit CUP 20-1203. And I would just add then that any decision by the Planning Commission tonight will be final unless appealed to the City Council within 10 working days. And that concludes staff's report. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Gentlemen, in your own time.
I have a number of questions for clarification. And we permitted this according to the staff report, and I couldn't find the original request. But according to the staff report, they came to us to operate a mission and church. That's a quote out of the staff report. And so my first question to staff is, what is the difference, and I know this is going to get technical, but what is the difference between a mission and a church? And I think it also speaks to this category A versus category B, which at our last meeting, frankly for me, and I don't know about the other commissioners, was the first time that those distinctions had actually been brought to my attention, or at least I recognize them as being different. And if I understand correctly, they're currently they would be permitted, or they have the facilities to operate as a category B, but they can't operate as a category A church, if I'm understanding the analysis as put forth by staff. Yet, according to the staff report, they came to us back in 2012 to operate a mission and a church, and that's what we approved. And so I need some help in clarifying that, Pierre. And along those lines, it seems to me, if I'm understanding, what they've really failed to do is they've failed to do the garbage dumpster enclosure and the removal of the temporary banner sign replaced with a permanent sign. And that's the real issue. The second statement, I'm looking at page 3 of the staff report of item 7.1, the second paragraph, which reads there, in addition, the building was permitted as a Group B occupancy. I'm wondering if that's technically accurate, since in the following page it says they came to us to operate a mission and a church, and maybe that's a subtle difference that we kind of overlooked, but it seems like we permitted them, or the council ultimately did, because we had a 2-2 vote. Maybe the council ultimately permitted them to operate a mission and a church, and so it just seems that there's some clarification and cleanup that we need to deal with. I hope maybe you could help me with that.
I'm not going to attempt to try and define the difference between a mission and a church, and the reason being is the applicant, the name of the church entity is the Mercy Way Rescue Mission Church, and we'll have to wait for the applicant to correct me if I've misstated that, but that's our understanding. So essentially what I'm going to try and do is just focus in on the conditions of approval they haven't met. True, the City Council did approve conditional use permit to allow for a church to operate in this building, and I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to get into whether there's a difference of the mission, but I'm just making the assumption that they both require, or they would both would be allowed in a Group A occupancy building. This building only achieves a Group B.
Okay.
Therefore, under the building code, they can have what's called skilled development, and skilled development allows for I would say, most of the uses that they're currently engaged in, and that's the counseling, and they want to have Bible study, they can do that as well. All that's allowed within a Group B occupancy. But they can't be a church because under the California Building Code, that requires a Group A occupancy. And in order to achieve that, they would have to construct a second exit in the building. And that's up to the applicant. I'm not going to get in whether they can or they can't. I
Sure.
think it's just a matter of the appropriate funding, and they can do the necessary improvements and then get an A occupancy, and then they can be a church.
Okay. So I appreciate that. So bear with me just a little bit because, first of all, you said most of what they're doing is allowable under the existing permitting of the building. So it sounds like it was permitted as a Group B occupancy, even though perhaps the applicant thought they were getting not only a mission but also a church. And kind of one of the things I'm hearing is, well, they can't advertise themselves as a church. If they advertise themselves as a mission, that might be okay. But they can't advertise themselves as a church because they don't meet the requirements as you just stated. Now, I went through the conditional use permit requirements that I believe that we specified. And unless I missed them, I couldn't find anything in there where we put upon the applicant the need to add the additional exit and other requirements that would be needed to satisfy a church. And part of me is wondering, and I haven't even gotten into the attractive nuisance issue, which is a separate issue, but I'm kind of wondering if perhaps there's a miscommunication here between city and applicant as to, well, you're doing the mission thing, that's category B, that's okay, but if you want to do the church and advertise the church, that's a different category and you've got to do X, Y, and Z, which I don't see in the original conditional use permit requirements.
I would, and I understand what you're saying, but I think we discussed this a little bit at our last meeting when you're looking at to what extent or what level of detail should the conditions of approval provide for the applicant. Well, generally speaking, let's just say for sake of discussion that this was a vacant lot. The city code requires a conditional use permit for a church in any zone. So you have a vacant lot, Church A wants to come in and build a church on this lot, they would apply for a conditional use permit. Probably one of the standard conditions is, the construction shall comply with all building and other applicable codes. We're not going to define or put all the different provisions of the building code, the plumbing code, the electrical code in the conditions of approval for the conditional use permit, because the conditional use permit is giving just the standard conditions for the use within the zoning, not applying all the conditions that would apply for getting a final on your building permit. So in this particular case, you had an applicant that had an existing building. Okay, it was formerly it was used as storage for the Taqueria, and before that it was a Greyhound bus station. So in other words, to be a church then they would, and the condition of approval was apply for your permit, and we worked with staff, we worked way over the 60 days it was allotted. And as a director, I felt that I had that ability then, as long as I felt there was due diligence on the side of the applicant to come in and meet with us and work towards getting their building permit. In my discussions with the building official that finally decided to final their permit, is they were able to final, because they were using the building before it was finalized. Mm-hmm. Staff was at a point where we were going to look at maybe red tagging the building. In fact, I basically told the building official that I want to give him one more week and then we're going to red tag the building, because I didn't want some unfortunate accident to happen and then there's liability on the city, because we knew that they were not finalized and they were using the building when they didn't have a final occupancy yet. So anyways, they finally did come in and we finalized the permit. We removed any reference to church or any reference to any use on the approved plans that would show that it's a Group A occupancy, because it wasn't. And so the permit issued to them is Group B, and which allowed them then to continue their counseling and other church missions, absent being a church or some other assembly type of use. So again, I want to differentiate between the conditions of approval aren't there to list, because it could go on for 100 pages.
No, fair enough. A church is a very specific building with specific requirements. So then what that then synthesizes down to, based upon what you just said, is that then we're still left with the failure to construct the garbage dumpster enclosure and the failure to remove the temporary banner sign and replace the permanent sign, and that really becomes really at kind of the crux of what we're talking about then this evening.
I would disagree. I really think that the trash enclosure and the permanent sign are certainly, excuse me, it's on my throat. The sign and the trash enclosures were required conditions of approval. So they need to satisfy those in order to be in full compliance for their permit to engage in the use. But I think the main condition they're not complying with is actually we're able to secure a building permit and then have the building permitted under a Group A occupancy so they could be a church. The reason for the conditional use permit.
Forgive my pushback, because I'm really trying to understand. I'm confused, because I'm looking at the findings. And the finding, I'm going to go with finding 3. The applicant has not replaced the temporary banner sign with a permanent sign. Okay, we all agree on that. That's not a problem. 2, working backwards. The applicant has not constructed the required refuse dumpster enclosure. No question about that. Has not happened. But then the first one, the applicant was unable to modify the building to meet the requirements of an assembly or Group A, but didn't I just hear you say that their permit, we removed everything that required the Group A criteria so that it would be B? And so if that's the case, unless I misunderstood, and that's not the first time, if we remove the Group A, how can we hit them over the head with a Group A, a failure to comply with Group A, if we in fact removed the Group A and said B is okay? I'm missing something in the analysis there.
Yeah, and I'll try and explain it again, and I apologize. for the-
Respectfully,
Yeah, and I
I'm sorry to
apologize
push
for the
back.
confusion. So
Okay.
let me see if I can explain this better. They applied for a conditional use permit for a church,
Okay?
okay? And it's conditional.
Yes.
There's a whole bunch of conditions they have to comply with. So one of those conditions is to get a building permit for Group A.
Right.
And that was known to the applicant at that time, because as a planning commissioner who approved this, that was not known. That's kind of the crux of it's one of the issues, that subtle difference between, remember it says mission and church. And I think, as we've said, that probably the vast majority of what they're doing already falls under the mission rubric, and not necessarily the church. To me, seems to fall into a very specific categorization. If you want to advertise as a church, you have to meet these requirements. And I'm just going back to when this was originally brought to us. The requirement, and it's nowhere in the permitting requirements. Okay, that this building, in order for this building to be used as a church, you're going to have to do X, Y, and Z, which normally we would do when we issue a conditional use permit. So that's why I'm kind of pushing this a little bit so much. So for everyone's edification.
One of the conditions of approval were they're required to pull a building permit.
Okay.
And they did pull a building permit.
Okay.
But they failed to get the building permitted and finalized as a Group A occupancy, only a Group B, meaning the need for a conditional use permit for a church is a moot point, basically.
Okay. So they can operate as a Group B because they're permitted to do that.
Yes.
What they cannot do is they cannot operate as a Group A church.
That's right.
Okay.
So, and I've spoken with the applicant, and he understands that. He understands that, he's permitted to carry counseling activities or other kinds of activities that his organization wishes to provide.
Okay. So last question, I promise.
No, it's okay.
What are we revoking then? Are we because we ultimately permitted them as a Group B, even though they came to us, I suppose, ostensibly for a Group A, but we permitted as Group B. Why aren't we simply exchanging the Group the conditional use permit for a church group A to a group B. That's what I guess what I'm confused. What are we revoking? And
Because a church cannot be in a group, a church cannot operate in a building that's permitted under the building code is with a Group B occupancy.
Okay.
But let me just start by saying is, I would start with what you're looking at regulating here is the use on a property under the zoning code. So, a church is permitted with a conditional use permit in any zone. So in this zone, highway commercial requires a conditional use permit. So they were approved, they got a conditional use permit to operate a church in this zone. They still have to either build the church if wasn't there, and it would comply with the building code then to be a church. If they fail to do that, then they wouldn't get a certificate of occupancy. They legally can't operate a church anyway,
okay,
even
I
if you
agree.
don't revoke the permit. The permit is just saying that they can operate a church in the highway commercial zone. So I wouldn't confuse the issue too much with, oh, it should have said a Group B occupancy, Group A occupancy. They have to comply with the building code. It'd be I'll try and give another example. Somebody wants to build an apartment complex. Well, that's an R, Group R something, depending upon how big the apartment complex. Well, you're not going to sit, a permit for that, if it was under, depending on the zone, if it was a conditional use permit, it's not going to get into what's required under the building code. They're going to submit
Yes,
their building plans, and we're going to make
I
sure that
agree.
it complies with the building code. Then they get their certificate of occupancy. Then they can occupy the building. But the use on that property in that zone district was authorized by this body and or the council
Okay.
through a conditional use permit. So you're authorizing a particular use in the property. There's nothing preventing the applicant from later coming in or modifying that building and complying with the building code and obtaining a Group A occupancy. Then they get their assembly, and then they can operate a church in that building, or they can tear it down and build a whole new church.
Sure. I promised I wouldn't ask another question. I'm not going to. I'm going to make a statement. It seems to me that they came for us for a CUP for a church. That was given to them by the council, but they were ultimately permitted from a building perspective as a Category B, and that's what we have to reconcile this evening. And I appreciate everyone's time.
Okay, what's been helpful for me to think about this is, first of all, I think the conflation of the proposed uses of the building versus the life safety issues is an unhelpful conflation. I think it's risky for any government agency to opine on any aspect of a church and how it might be used. So when I look at the sign in the back of the room here, it says you can have no more than 345 people in this room. That's an artifact of how many doors and means of egress there are from this building. That's an evaluation that the state fire marshal or another similar organization makes on how the building can be safely used. The only issue I see in front of us today is that the building as it currently exists is safe for 8 people to occupy it at once. From my point of view, whether there are 7 worshipers and a pastor in that building, I think we should be silent on that. I think the issue comes down to the fact that once another door is cut into that wall, then the safe occupancy of the building goes to whatever the number was, 40, 45, 46, whatever that number is. So it becomes a very straightforward evaluation for me, looked at purely from the life safety aspects of that.
Mr. Chairman, I respect those comments, and I think that when we bring it back after public comment, then we can have a discussion on that. I think your point on, and the question that I still have then, if we were to revoke the conditional use permit, where does that leave the applicant in terms of what they're able to do at all, given the building as it is? And that's unclear to me.
Okay, my understanding is that the applicant is good to go with 8. Do I understand that correctly? Is that if the CUP as is before the Planning Commission tonight is a revocation of the Class A use, the Class B use continues unimpeded. Is that correct?
If the conditional use permit, which allows for a church on this site, on this site, not in the building, but they were then afforded all the uses allowed by right in a highway commercial zone, and they're afforded all the uses that are allowed within a Group E occupancy within this building. And as I thought I explained earlier, a Group E occupancy allows what's called skilled development. And that's a whole myriad of activities such as counseling and Bible study and those kinds of things. And I want to differentiate between a church, because a church is assembly. No, they can't be a church, but they can be a counseling center, or they can be sort of a rehab center where they're trying to talk to people, that sort of a thing. And they're limited, and under the building code, they're limited to a maximum of 8 persons. Under a Group A, they're allowed many more than that, but they would have to get the second exit.
Okay, so to keep it within the realm of my limited capacity, it's the fire safety or life safety issues that limit the occupancy of the building to 8 people. Is that a true statement?
That is correct. But again, I think we seem to be concentrating more on the Group A versus Group B occupancy, which is a technical aspect of the building, meaning the building code. What I'm trying to concentrate on is the use allowed from a zoning perspective.
Right.
That a church is allowed by conditional use permit in this zone on this property, and they have failed to meet the conditions of approval. One of them being a building permit for a Group A for a church building.
Right.
The other one being the enclosure
Right.
for the trash dumpsters, and then the third then being the sign.
Right.
Those are minor compared to the building one.
Right. And I deeply respect and admire you discharging your responsibility to provide due process. I'm not in any way trying to short-circuit that due process. But for me, the simplest analysis is that without proper egress, that building is not safe for more than 8 people to occupy at once.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
For the record, I have one more question, but I'm not going to ask it. And I'm going to wait.
Okay, well, let's now open the hearing to public comment. First of all, I'd ask that the applicant or the applicant's representative come talk to us. State your name for the record, sir.
Hi, I'm Michael Parr from Mercy Way Rescue Church. I am the applicant representing the building. Thank you all very much. I was taking some quick notes. I have some things I was going to say, but first, based on your questions, the fire marshal said our occupancy is 49, and that's what it says. We can be occupied by 49 people in that building based on the fire marshal's inspection.
With a single entrance and exit.
Yes, sir. So anyway, go on. Just to address that issue, I know what the code says, so there's a discrepancy here. And I'm confused. I've been confused by this whole process because I don't even think the A and B thing came up until April, with all due respect, when Pierre was doing the research. I don't recall that discussion prior to that. I could be wrong. And in fact, the city couldn't find the building permit, and I'm the one that gave it to them that led to this. So we're really trying to cooperate. Our goal here is to work with everybody that meets everybody's satisfaction. But I think I haven't done a very good job of explaining all the things we do there. Yesterday I attended a memorial service for one of the homeless people that died. I did it and that's part of my job. And that was on a Sunday. We take people down to the VA, to the health clinic. Their rides no one has rides anymore. The VA clamped down on rides. I have one planned tomorrow morning to take them down there. We have a hospital ministry where I work with the chaplain, Tim Thompson, from the Sierra Law Enforcement Chaplaincy, who's also the Marshal chaplain, and the Social Services Department, where we take people to the hospital, we pick them up, we work with them, we counsel them, we provide pastoral care. We have a jail ministry. Mary Maga, who no longer does anything on site, has maintained her jail ministry where she goes in twice a week to work with some of the homeless people or the people we work with that are part of our clientele to provide Bible study and prayer. We do transportation constantly. It's a big need. People don't have to go out and panhandle to get bus tickets as long as we're providing, you know, I'm sure some are still going to do it. We go to the emergency room. We take people to medical, dental, legal. We take people to court. We go to Sacramento. We've taken people down to the bus and train stations. We have reconciled 8 people with their families. And because we've done that, I think I mentioned that, we have sent people to Missouri, Arkansas. We've sent people to rehab in San Francisco and Redding. So ironically, we've probably provided more people to leave Placerville than anybody else. We have at least 8 people we've helped get back to what they're supposed to be doing. We have Celebrate Recovery this morning. Pierre dropped by. We have 8, 10, 12 folks there sometimes. It's part of the community and it's part homely. It's a 12-step program based on the Bible. They have the 12 steps. People are going there to stay clean and sober, and they sponsor people, and it's a place to go, which I think is beneficial to all. Since CRC closed down, the AA people meet at our church. That's a community AA people. That's not homeless people. They use our facility for Alcoholics Anonymous. Homeless people are welcome. They have more than 8 people there. You know, we also do things for the community, not just homeless people. I provided rides to the gentleman next door that works at the restaurant twice to Sacramento to see his children and visit with them so he could be a good dad. Last winter, we collected coats, and we passed out coats to all the kids and all the people in the neighborhood. And right now, we have 2 people named Jerry who started a community team, Mercy Way Rescue Community Team. Last week, they cleaned up the garbage on Broadway, and they want to expand that service eventually to doing chores for seniors and people that can't get out as part of our church mission. So hopefully, I don't think I've ever said some of those things before to give people an idea of what we're doing. I think they hear the word homeless, and it naturally causes some concern. I'm a homeowner. I understand those concerns. I've used the private nuisance law many times in small claims court to deal with issues in the neighborhood where people have the right to the peaceful, quiet enjoyment of their property, you know, to loud music, loud cars. I had a fraternity move in by me one time, the worst experience of my life. But thanks to the private nuisance law, they didn't stay long. And we're the first ones to admit we made mistakes last December. I made some major mistakes. I said a couple weeks ago, our best guy working for us went to Arkansas. The people we picked to help us out after he left were the wrong choices. And that's where the police report came from. That's where some of the complaints came from, and it lasted for 6 weeks. I must have misspoke, it said 6 months or something, but it was 6 weeks. Thanksgiving through the first week of January. So then we voluntarily closed down to do 2 things, to regroup and to let the construction take place. During that time, we were still the pickup place for the church shelters in the community. And I think that's where some of the problems came with next door with the restaurant. I've talked to the owner many times. I've given him my phone number many times. We go there to eat many times. I tried to establish a relationship with him. He's a very nice man, Miguel. And when we found out that the people meeting there were causing problems, I have the emails, I can prove it. I didn't have a lot of time to get ready. I just got this stuff Thursday. I immediately said, we're not meeting there anymore. It's not fair to the restaurant. And then we moved down to the CRC. I asked them permission, but it took a while. During the time of that transition, we hired a guy to monitor the parking lot, the restaurant, and to keep everybody in front of our building and away from the restaurant, away from the parking lot, so we would not intimidate anyone from going to the restaurant. As part of making amends, we're trying to raise some money, $200. We have a very low budget. We get by on about $1,300 a month for all utilities and getting motel rooms and gas and rent. But we want to give him the ability to give out $102 off coupons. And we give him the $200, he can give out the coupons and build his business back up. We're going to hold our board meetings there from now on. So in that, I know there were some concerns in the package about the restaurant. Once we stopped the shelter meeting there in the end of January, there have been no more problems like that. There's no, and I could see where it would look bad to customers. So in our efforts to follow the CUP, it's confusing to me. We were told we have a conditional use permit where we can have up to 20 people, but now I'm hearing that we're actually Class B and we can only have 8. And we did fail to do the enclosure around the dumpster. We were going to work with Miguel at the restaurant And I don't know, Chris Oliveira is our engineer and architect, and he had come up with a solution. We could use the restaurant's dumpsters. We only have one dumpster in that parking lot. The other dumpster and the oil thing belong to the restaurant. We have one small dumpster, but we did fail that. We did not do what we should have done on the conditional use permit. The sign is the other thing. I was totally confused on the sign, and that was my bad. Once my wife found it, Pierre came by today, and he had told me already, she took down the temporary sign, but we don't have a permanent sign. So hopefully that tells you about some of the things we do. We're admitting the mistakes we made, and we corrected ourselves. We were being a good neighbor to Miguel, and we caused a few problems, and we immediately corrected it, and we're trying to do other things to protect his business. We're trying to be a good neighbor. We let anybody at any time come in and use our bathroom when we're open, so they don't have to use the public for the bathroom. Anybody can come in and use the bathroom. We teach people life skills about littering, about treating people right, about being respectful as part of our processes there. You know? So as part of it, again, about the conditional use permit, I never heard about the A or B, and that could be my problem. But what I did, we got a conditional use permit, and we've been trying to follow that. So we got the fire marshal saying we can have 49, the conditional use permit saying we can have 20, and now if we go to Class B, then we're only allowed 8. That seems pretty confusing to me about what we can do there. We just want to know. We just want to follow what is right. We've jumped through quite a bit of hoops, you know, including paying $400 for an appeal that we didn't need to pay for, that Mr. Webb said we needed to pay for, and then called me and said we didn't. And we were out $400 over Christmas and didn't get it refunded till the next January. We've made our mistakes. I've made some mistakes, but I think we've cleaned them up, and our intention is not to thumb our nose at anybody. The upgrades we made cost $7,946 to the building as part of the building permit process. We have an ADA compliant bathroom. It's one big 898 square foot building. It's square. We put in a little office and now the ADA bathroom. There's a roll-up door. I don't know why that can't be considered a second ed. There's a roll-up door right next to the double door. And I'm not sure, I mean, so we really do have a second door if we could keep it open or roll it up or something, but that's not what I came to say. I just thought of that. You know, and we've gone some to other challenges. We get people driving by and flipping us off, and we get people driving by and taking pictures of us and looking at us, and people dump their garbage at our dumpster all the time that they don't want to take to the dumps. We take mattresses. This week we had a 4-drawer dresser, and I think the mattress became an issue with the neighbors. They thought we were letting people sleep behind the building, and someone just dumped it there so they didn't have to pay. And we end up taking all this stuff to the dumps and incurring all the costs to keep the property cleaned up. And it has been cleaned up, and we have been following all the rules, everything since the middle of February. There's one other issue that scares me, is at the end of the city council meeting last month when we were discussing the homeless, the people from Wiltsey Avenue were sitting behind Pastor Mary and Pastor Frank. And they were very adamant about getting the homeless people out of here. And I understand it, that's their right, and I have no problem with that. But they were threatening them with violence. They were threatening them, I got this from both pastors, that, you know, it's about time they start kicking the homeless in the face and knocking the crap out of them and getting them off Broadway. That's what we're facing out there, that environment now that's been set out there, and we're a place that tries to provide a safe sanctuary for folks. So there are other additions. I'm not saying we're not responsible, but there's other things going on that sort of counterbalance all this. And the loitering that we discussed, I don't know how anybody can keep someone from loitering in their building at 3 o'clock in the morning. We've put up signs. We walk around. When I'm in the neighborhood, I drive by at weird hours, you know. And so anyway, I just like to say one last thing. I think we're actually an asset to the community. We're not attracting bad people. We're not devaluing home properties. We're trying to be a good neighbor. And, you know, is it fair, legal, and ethical to revoke our CUP because of the temporary problems we did last December that are no longer a problem based on the police report and the other letters in the package? So if we lose our CUP, it should be because we didn't do the sign and we didn't do the dumpster. But if we go to Class B, 8 doesn't work. What do we do when the 9th person comes into Alcoholics Anonymous or Celebrate Recovery or comes in to study the Bible? The fire marshal said 49. We're not even close to that. So I would like to know if we could just postpone this, all work together for everybody's good, and straighten out some of these discrepancies. and then have it all in writing, not what someone said, well, you can do this in the hallway, and then all of a sudden it becomes a problem 6 months later, to have it all worked out. We want to cooperate, but it's been a little confusing. Thank you.
Pastor, you may not want to leave the podium yet in case someone might have a question.
Yes, I do. Sorry.
You have a question?
The number 49, was that based on the plans that you submitted to be a church? Is that correct?
You know, from the beginning, we've been known as, what our real name is the Mercy Way Rescue Mission Church and Sanctuary.
Okay.
The incorporated name is Mercy Way Rescue, Inc.
Now, okay, so the
So
person
I
that
think in
you-
all the paperwork I handed in, it said Mercy Way Rescue Mission Church and Sanctuary. We were using the full name back then when we applied for this process. When we found out our initial mistake that we needed to do some things, and we came forward to try to get it figured out.
Okay, but my point is, when you submitted plans to the city to fulfill, to become a Class A church, okay, a church, not just a Class B building, did on the plans, did they put on there that the fire marshal was setting it up for 40 people?
You know, sir, I don't know. I can get that answer for you, but not right now.
Because I think that's part of what I'm coming up with is, I can appreciate you saying 8 isn't enough. Sure it isn't, and we all agree with that. But the safety issues, if you were given from your engineer, your architect, a set of plans that said if you do these things, you make these modifications to the building, then that building can house up to 49 people, or whatever that number was.
Yeah, I understand.
All right.
I just don't recall right now. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I should have had that information. I just know that the fire marshal came and inspected, and we put a note of occupancy limited to 49 people on the wall, even though we've never had 49 people there.
Does the staff know on that? But
Staff can certainly comment. Mr. Parr keeps referring to, the fire marshal. It's the city of Placerville, it's the building official that determines and issues the building permit, not the fire district. I want to make that abundantly clear. I also want to make it clear that we seem to be getting sort of wrapped around the axle of a Group A occupancy group versus a Group B. It's up to the applicant however he wants to modify that building. The point being, whether or not the conditional use permit gets, stayed or gets revoked, the city's going to have to enforce the building code, irrespective, because the Planning Commission isn't regulating or giving direction on the building code. What you're doing is considering whether or not there should be a conditional use permit to allow a church in the highway commercial zone on this particular piece of property. And so I think we're being drawn into an area where it's sort of a moot point. Is that helpful?
well, yeah.
May I say something? I absolutely understand that it's your job to enforce it. The subject came up of human safety. So what I brought forward to comment on was that the fire marshal originally said 49. I'm not saying that you have to do 49. They brought that up. I just made it as a comment. I know that that's not your point of view.
Well, may I, and so now I've just been informed that the fire marshal is not the governing body on this topic. It's the city.
Okay.
So we're back to what numbers the city decides the number should be.
That's fine.
Yeah, just for clarification, if I may, Mr. Chairman, the fire marshal enforces the California Fire Code, where the city is enforcing the building code.
I have a general question. If any applicant had come to the city hall regarding this building, saying they wanted to do training, Bible study, etc., they could just go forward by right, ministerial, over the counter, no CUP required. The CUP was only required because there was a church, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So they can go forward with everything they do. They don't need that extra layer of a CUP because that's a requirement of the zoning.
Yes, and that's sort of the position that staff is taking, is that, you know, they originally applied for this back in November 12th of, or 19th of November of 2012, and it's now, you know, May in 2014, and we still don't have satisfaction of the conditions of approval, basically the three, the main one being a building that was built to be a church. Therefore, as you pointed out, Commissioner Drobish, it's a moot point for the conditional use permit because it's not a church facility. And you again correctly point out that since we did issue a permit, because the city was concerned the building was being occupied and used, and they didn't have any kind of occupancy. And occupancy load meaning the type of building it is versus the maximum number of persons allowed in the building. That's sort of a confusing thing too. So anyways, they have a Group B occupancy, meaning that they can conduct specialized or skill development activities, which includes counseling and those other kinds of things. But they are limited to the maximum occupancy of 8 persons unless they do some other modifications to the building.
How, I have to ask the question, how do we reconcile this 8 with the 49 that has been issued by, somebody has issued maximum occupancy not to exceed 49? And my guess is that's a legal official. I'm sorry, am I the only one that's having some struggle with this? And I don't mean to direct my intensity at staff, but this seems to be pretty glaring. And certainly from the applicant's point of view, right? They're trying to figure out what they're supposed to do. And they clearly haven't done everything, and I haven't asked my questions of you yet, and they don't count for the other questions I said I wasn't going to ask. But I am having a really difficult time now reconciling this maximum occupancy. Just like that sign above that door was pointed out to us earlier, maximum occupancy shall not exceed 49. Why can't they, without a CUP, conduct their planned development activities or focused skill development activities up to 49 folks? And no, you see what I'm saying, Pierre? I'm really struggling with this. Frankly, I just think we have discrepancies at several levels that need to be sorted out.
I do understand what you're saying, Commissioner Friend, and let me see if I can help resolve your dilemma. First of all, again, I think we're starting to get too much into the regulations under the building code, which is different from zoning. There's nothing, let's just say for sake of discussion that they were able to build a building that had an occupancy of 200. But under the conditional use permit, you can lower that amount. Maybe they didn't have enough parking. Maybe there were some other constraints on the site. Maybe the site was overdeveloped because there's a restaurant on it. Who knows? The commission, under its land use authority in the zoning code, could say, yes, you can have a church, but we don't want, we think because of the, whatever the constraints are, that you're limited to 100 persons. Where maybe under the building code, they could build a building that could seat 200 or more. See what I'm saying?
Yes,
you
I
have
do.
two different regulations there. So the 49, I think the 49 comes from something that was sort of taken out of the building code. And so it had to do if they were able to meet their Group A occupancies in an assembly building, like this building is an assembly, Group A, then that was the maximum number on that was placed on that building, no more than 49 persons. But what I'm saying is that still doesn't, the zoning thresholds of maximum persons on a site or parking, that doesn't trump the building code. They still have to meet the minimum requirements of the building code for the occupancy of the use that they're applying for so they could use the building. Is that helpful?
Sort of. Yes, thank you. Sort of. Okay, I have more questions, but I'm going to yield to my fellow commissioners. I have questions of the applicant, actually.
Okay, well, what we'll do is we'll ask the applicant to come back to the podium after any others who wish to speak to this issue have had a chance to talk.
Okay. That's, if it does.
Well, I guess you better not get comfortable.
Yes, sir.
I have a question of staff. I've always read the automatic appeal to city council when this body has a tie vote or what have you. And there's no statement in there of fees, and it's always kind of bothered me. I would like to have it clearly defined. If there's no action by this body, there's an automatic appeal to city council. It should state free of charge, half fee, full fee, just, it needs to be defined. So, I don't know if that takes an action by council.
I'm not sure if an applicant in that situation is required to pay any additional fees. The applicant, it's a, this is not a time and materials application, and so if it is appealed, some jurisdictions, if the appeal is by the applicant, because the applicant didn't like the decision of the planning commission, then there's maybe an additional fee. But I'm going to have to defer to Mr. Painter, the city planner, to help me with that. Because if somebody else appeals or whatever, typically then there's no additional fee on the applicant. Again, this is not a time and materials conditional use permit application. It was a flat fee.
There is a fee associated with an appeal of an action taken or a determination made by this department or this body or a condition of approval. So in the case of Member Drobish's example, where no action is taken, then I think we can conclude that there would be no application fee going forward for that. It would just go to city council for their determination. So again, to distinguish the two, if an action was taken tonight by the majority of this body for whatever purpose or direction they want to go, a interested person, not only the applicant, could appeal that decision or any conditions of approval should this body decide that not to revocate the permit but to add additional conditions or something of that nature. Does that help? Okay.
Thank you.
And if I may, for clarification, Andrew pointed this out to me, that the appeal period is 10 calendar days, not 10 working days.
I have a couple questions for the applicant. And so I've been kind of beating up on staff a little bit, not intentionally, but and I'm going to beat up on you a little bit.
That's okay.
Is it Pastor Mike?
Yeah, it's Mike Parr.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were here in front of us because this issue was on our agenda at the last meeting, I believe, and you were aware of the concerns with the impact of your facility with regards to taqueria. Right, that came up then, if I remember correctly.
Yes, sir.
Did you ask the owner of the taqueria to come here this evening to speak in support of you?
No, I did not.
Why not?
I actually did not even think about it.
Okay.
I mean, to give you an honest answer.
No, that's a believable answer. Okay.
We've been really busy.
Note to self. The applicant has not replaced the temporary banner sign with a permanent sign. Why didn't you do that?
On the sign issue, I completely messed it up. I didn't do it.
How long would it take you to meet that requirement?
It would depend. We have no money. It would take the temporary banners down. A lot of our problems are driven by money.
Sure.
Not total irresponsibility. Some irresponsibility.
No,
Like,
no,
not.
no insinuation of irresponsibility.
I didn't think you did. I'm just being honest. You know, we would need to find out how much is. I think I was waiting for. I don't mean to pass the buck. I've been waiting a couple weeks to get the sign information in an email.
Okay.
So I know exactly what we have to do and do it.
Okay.
One of our board members.
Do you know what the sign requirements are? Has that been explained to you?
Not yet.
So you don't even know what you would have to do in terms of a sign?
No, sir.
Well, we
I
want
should.
something
It's
that
my
looks, we
responsibility
would
to
like
find
something
out.
that looks similar to the In and Out. You know that sign, that big one? If you could put something like that so we
Should
could
it be in-
find your place, be like the Holy Grail. Okay,
Purple neon that says Jesus saves?
that'd be good. The applicant has not constructed the required dumpster and refuse dumpster enclosure. Now I look up here. The site currently has 2 refuse dumpster and 1 waste fats and oils container. The waste fats and oils container belongs to the restaurant,
Yes.
and one of the dumpsters belongs to the restaurant,
Yes, sir.
and there's another dumpster that you use.
Yes.
To staff, why would we ask the applicant to enclose all 3 when they're only, why haven't we asked the taqueria, for example, I guess, to enclose the waste fat, oil, and the other dumpster?
The taqueria is not, we're not reviewing, or another purview of an application.
But is
So
it,
we don't, the city
Okay.
doesn't go in and retroactively then require businesses that were, say, initiated and are operating under all existing laws.
I
at
withdraw
that
my
time.
question. I'd like to submit a different question. Why should we ask this applicant to cover all 3 when they're only using 1?
Because in this particular application and this particular conditional use permit is very discrete in terms of the portion of this parcel, which includes the entire parking lot.
Okay.
So in other words, he doesn't get to pick and choose, or from staff's position, we don't really care who owns the dumpsters. The requirement is that any dumpsters on that site be contained within an enclosure per the conditional use permit.
Okay, great. So you could do that, and you could improve the look of the property and do something nice with the taqueria. How long would it take you to do that?
We have Chris Oliveira drawing the plans, and a lot of times when you have a volunteer drawing your plans, it takes a little longer than if you're paying for it. But as soon as he gets us the plans, we have Home Depot credit cards. We could go to Home Depot, get the material, and we have volunteer labor that can put it up.
I'd like to ask you for a specific time requirement to meet all of these conditions, except that we don't know what signage requirements you have, so that makes it a little bit more difficult. Can you elaborate a little bit more with regards to the roll-up door? You said there's a roll-up door right next to the double door. I think that was what you stated, and that gives a second entrance exit. Did I hear that correctly?
Well, that thought just came to my mind while we were having this discussion. It's about 10 feet, if you're facing the door, it's about 10 feet to the east or left of the building.
Yeah,
And there's a roll-up door
yeah.
opens and closes, that you could back a truck in. I mean, you know, that's the typical
Okay.
building roll-up door in that neighborhood.
And that's a direct access in and out of the building.
Yes, sir.
There was one other thing, and I brought this up at the last meeting. I'm going to bring it up again. In the police report, they go out of their way to mention something about putting out a fire in the, there it is, observed an unattended fire pit within one of the abandoned campsite areas in the vicinity. You don't own any of those. None of those are under your purview or
No,
you're
sir.
responsible. They just happen to be in the neighborhood.
Right. We have no control over the property around our building, when we're not there especially. If I had been there, I'd go up there and say something.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. May I make 2 quick comments?
At your peril.
Yeah, I know, I really do. I want to keep this going. No, you guys are fine. Everybody's great. First is, people have disagreements, and I think that I haven't said enough that I'm very appreciative and grateful to our entire board and all the people for Pierre and the work of Andrew with the city. Any disagreements are simply little disagreements. They've been fantastic and cooperative with us. I have no complaints. I just don't remember the entire A and B conversation till lately. That's why we haven't pursued any action to make it an A facility. I just don't require that. I remember being in a room, in a meeting, and we came up with this classification. I don't recall A or B, you know, and that could be my memory and my lack of responsibility in documenting things. So that's what I find frustrating. And then getting a conditional use permit that says we can have 20 people, why would we get that if we weren't supposed to have more than 8 people based on Bs? So all I want to do is clarify all this, get legal, and keep doing what we're doing. Thanks.
So just for clarification, this is kind of a technicality. For zoning reasons, if they wanted to come in and just do their thing, ministerial, go ahead and do it. No review by this body whatsoever. But the second that you want to go in as a church, correct me if I'm wrong, but the second that you want to go in as a church in that highway commercial zone, then you have to go in with a CUP.
That is correct. The applicant needs the CUP, and Andrew pointed me out their original application. It says mission and church, worship, Bible study. It was a description supplied by the applicant. So I think that was a carryover, not from the previous Development Services Director,
Okay.
Mike Webb. I just want to throw
So if that,
for clarification.
on the application, if the word church hadn't been in there, it would have been rescue, mission. They wouldn't have needed the CUP, but as.
Well, they
as-
could, they could put, an assembly use. They don't even have to list it as a church.
Okay.
There's other kinds of uses that would then be an assembly use. But I want to point out too is as far as, there was a lot of discussion about the sign. I think because they had signs and banners on the building that weren't up to city code. Therefore, one of the conditions of the use permit was to come in with a permanent sign in accordance with the code. We're not requiring them to put a sign up. They don't have to have a sign other than an address so that the fire district can find the location. But we're not requiring them to have a sign. We're requiring them that if they have a sign, it meets city code. The temporary sign doesn't. If the conditional use permit goes away, do they have to put the dumpsters in enclosures? No, that's a condition of the conditional use permit to have a church facility here. If it goes away, then they don't have to worry about constructing an enclosure for the dumpsters.
Mr. Chairman, if I can make a suggestion, we're still technically in public hearing, and I think we may be moving into questions of staff and discussion here, so I don't know if you want to formally close the public hearing or... I'm sorry.
I don't know if you've asked the other parts of our audience whether they want to speak.
I believe the chairman did, but it never hurts to reiterate it, but then at some point we'll formally close it.
Sure. We thank the pastor for his testimony, asked the other occupants of the room if they wanted to speak on this, and before the pastor had an opportunity to be fully seated, we asked him to return to the podium. So this closes the public hearing portion of the meeting.
So then I do have one final question for staff, and I appreciate what you just said, Pierre, because that really synthesized it. If we were to revoke the CUP, what would they not be able to do in their facility?
This facility would then no longer, they could not use it as a church. In other words, they can't have church hours where people just come and that sort of thing. It would be more of the, under the Group B, which they could use the building by rights, commercial building. Under Group B occupancy, there's a number of different uses, the counseling and those kinds of things.
And the occupancy would be limited to what?
8. That's based on the square footage of the building.
What is the value of the 49?
I think the 49 came out of the building code. If they were in a Group A occupancy and they had the emergency exit, I think under that occupancy, I think it boosted it up to 49. I'd have to check on that, but it's sort of a moot point.
Okay.
But it has to do with, again, how they construct the building, if they have the second access or not.
Okay. And the roll-up door doesn't qualify as a second access?
No, it doesn't. I had the
Okay.
same I had staff,
Okay. Okay.
as a more of a planning background, had the same question of our building official and looking at the code. Wow, they have a door and it's a double door plus the roll-up door, but it's all on the same side of the building. They need
Okay.
to have an exit in the rear.
Gotcha. All right, so are you in a position to list what would be required for them to meet the Category A specification? Aside from, they have to have the emergency exit, that's a new construction. What else would they have to have?
I think that's about it.
Okay.
I think it was the emergency exit that was preventing them from actually seeking the Group A occupancy.
And-
But it's just, unfortunately, because it's a cinder block building, so you're looking at quite a substantial modifications and costs to improve this building, plus you have the hillside directly behind the building, so you're looking at retaining walls, you're looking at an ADA requirement to build a walkway to be able to get out from behind the building. You're looking at a significant amount of costs, and I would think, you know, again, that's for Mr. Parr to respond to, but I would think if earlier he was saying that the $7,000 or whatever dollars they invested in the building, I think this is a lot, this will be a lot more. It might be more than they could chew. But again, I don't want to speak, you know, for the church or for the applicant, but I think that's probably what the problem is.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions from the commission to staff?
Would it be inappropriate in the potential list of findings to add a number 4? The applicant has not met the time allotment for meeting said conditions.
Yes, I think the commission, staff provided you with a lot of information. A lot of information had to do with nuisance issues. And so the staff felt that it seemed, at least from our perspective, that it would have been just easier just to hone in on the very basic conditions that weren't being met, that were basic to engaging in the use permitted by the use permit. But as far as what's in the record, anything that's been in the record from the previous staff report or what's been provided to you through testimony, it's your discretion to add additional findings that you find appropriate.
Okay, so just generally speaking, if the CUP is revoked, it frees them up from the expense of enclosing the dumpster.
Correct?
They don't have to have a sign,
Correct.
so when they do get a permanent one, they can put it up. Potentially, they could look at, is that roll-up door you said is in the same wall as the?
Same, yes. It's in the, I guess it would be the north elevation of the building. The face of the building that fronts Broadway has a roll-up door.
I was just thinking it could be converted into a man door fairly easy, but if it's in the same plane, it doesn't, okay.
And I
Thank you.
do want to point out too, just for the record, because Mr. Parr was fairly animate in making the point of various uses where other organizations use the facility, Alcoholics Anonymous and some other groups, and they're exceeding that occupancy. You know, I just want to point that out, that would be in violation of the building code, and the city could red tag the building. So I would hope that they're going to comply with that, either comply with the maximum occupancy allowed. They can come and talk to us anytime, and we can certainly go over those numbers and make sure that it's not 10 or something else, but it's based on some simple math.
But you see how it can be confusing for anybody to have a sign issued to them, maximum occupancy is 49, right? I mean, I'm still wrestling with that. I'm still having a challenge as to what's the value of that, because now it has to do with the category B and not necessarily with safety. That maximum occupancy, I believe, is a safety issue. And so is there a way to use that building outside the category B, or the zoning doesn't permit the use then?
I would just add it's always a health and safety issue as far as the maximum number of persons in a building. So we have assembly, you have a lot of people that are, you know, typically in a seated situation. I know we tried to work with the applicant in terms of getting fixed seating and seeing if that could improve the numbers. But again, that's all under the building code. It's up to the applicant of whatever improvements they want to do. But again, there may be a maximum occupancy in terms of the maximum number of persons in any given building, such as this one. But that doesn't restrict the Planning Commission from, say, restricting number of persons allowed based on maybe availability of parking. Maybe they only had 3 parking spaces, so you're going to limit the people that could use a particular facility based on some other parameters under the zoning code. But this is all under the building code.
I've often seen signs that give you 2 numbers, one for seated and one for assembly. I've seen it. I just think it's incredibly confusing for the public. I mean, it's incredibly confusing as I sit here, incredibly confusing for the public to reconcile. both of these. So, well, I'll yield.
Okay, well, I'm prepared to call the question. Those of you who have worked with me a while are aware of my skill set at creating motions. So, but here's my take at it, and if people care to amend it or propose another motion, will take no offense whatsoever. Not that anybody cares about that. But, so basically, the question I'm going to call is a motion that we take a roll call vote on the staff recommendation to revoke CUP 20-2012-3. An aye vote indicates a vote for revocation. A no vote indicates a vote against revocation. So that's my motion.
Just to clarify, you said staff's recommendation, so that would be make the following findings 1 through 3.
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay, so
yeah.
as written in the staff report, we'll be voting on those
Right,
findings.
right, yeah. I mean, I probably rely too much on the implied lesser and included offense logic, which is to say, if we're swallowing their recommendation whole without changes, then I'm saying we vote on their recommendation. Those in favor of their recommendation to revoke the CUP are going to vote aye. Those who are against revoking the CUP vote no. But what we are voting for is exactly as you described. Our concurrence with, an aye vote indicates concurrence with staff's findings in toto.
I'll second.
Discussion, Mr. Chairman? I'm going to make 2 observations and then a proposed amendment. I'm going to make the observation that we granted, the city council granted an occupation ostensibly for Category A church, which was then subsequently permitted from the building side as Category B. They were issued by some government official an occupancy of 49. Yet their building permit would really only allow them an occupancy of 8. I would therefore request an amendment to the motion that we give the that this not take effect for 120 days. In other words, give the applicant 120 days to meet with the city to see if it's doable to achieve the Category A requirements. And if they can do that, then perhaps they can come back to this commission. I would like to give them that amount of time. I just think there's sufficient confusion in all of this at all levels in terms of how it was issued and what was issued, that we owe them at least that. That'd be I'd request that amendment.
Okay, as I understand it, then that amendment requires a second. Is that correct?
If staff could comment on that. I don't believe the commission would have the ability to condition a denial. So it's either you deny the revocation of staff, you deny staff's recommendation, deny the permit. In other words, you keep it alive, and then you can amend the conditions of approval.
Are you saying my motion's out of order?
Is
that what you wanted to say?
I'm trying to say it very
Okay,
delicately.
so I can't make, the amendment would be out of order. So it's either an up or down, either revoke, or we either revoke it or we don't revoke it.
That's correct.
So what it is method amendment is illegal with function vote.
Oh, I see 4 of us here.
Okay, so as John wisely suggests, I'm going to say that amendment died for lack of a second. The motion remains in front of the commission, and I'm prepared to ask for a roll call vote, but I see somebody's finger on the button.
Just for clarification, it does require 3 affirmatives to pass, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, with the reminder that an aye is a vote for revocation. Would you please?
Sure. Chair Lowry,
Aye.
Vice Chair Drobish,
Aye.
Member List,
Aye.
Member Friend.
Nay. Is this appealable to council?
This is appealable to council within, the applicant can appeal this decision within 10 calendar days.
Yes.
This is what Carol Ann Ogden would classify as a wicked problem.
Before we go to the next item, how are we dealing with, do we want to break? Do we want to, no?
We want a break.
Paging Mr. Drobish. Mr. Mike Drobish, paging Mr. Drobish.
Okay, men, fall in.
Yeah, nice work.
Okay, and we're back. Moving on to item 7.2, 3047 Brew Road, Site Plan Review, 2005-03, Major Change. A request to amend SPR 2005-3 to construct and operate additional permanent parking lot at 3047 Brew Road, APN 325-31093, located within the C Commercial Zone under the provisions of Section 1049P of the Zoning Code. Note, a categorical exemption, Section 15311, accessory small parking lots, has been prepared for this project in accordance with the requirements of the CEQA. Project lead is Andrew Painter, and we'll turn it over to Andrew.
Thank you. Yeah, this request would eliminate phases 3 and 4 that involve the construction of 2 additional buildings on the site, which you've described, as part of the original 4-phase project under SPR 2005-03. In the place of phases 3 and 4, 50 new permanent parking spaces would be built and landscaping installed. The parking layout and traffic circulation within the lot resembles the current temporary parking lot, which has been granted for the last couple of years on the location at the site. This is the portion of the site which would be, generally speaking, the north and easterly portions of the lot, not including, of course, the building that's already been built. There, as a condition of the temporary parking lot, the 3 existing, well, now existing parking lot light fixtures, again, previously installed and approved, those will be used for parking lighting for the new location. So therefore, no new fixtures are proposed. New landscaping with irrigation will be installed as shown on the project landscape plan. The existing propane tank, which is easterly of the existing building on site, will be screened with split face walls at a height of 5 feet. The property owners intend that the construction of the new parking areas is to occur in segments, which means that they are requesting to utilize on a temporary basis, as these segments are completed, to temporarily park vehicles on those sites that have not been permanently created in this general area. In staff's report, I've given you a brief summary, a long summary of the history of the site plan review, as well as the temporary use permits that have been granted over the past few years, again on the phase 3 and phase 4 area of the site. When staff analyzed the request, it involved reviewing it for consistency with the general plan, the city zoning ordinance, and the City of Placerville Development Guide. The vehicle parking request is consistent with the purposes of the commercial general plan land use designation for the site, in that it would be concentrated in a well-defined area and designed to create conditions conducive to a convenient and desirable environment for customers and employees using the commercial buildings on site and in the immediate vicinity. Under Section 1049 of the city's zoning ordinance, which is called the Site Plan Review section, vehicle parking lots and their uses require site plan review approval by the Planning Commission before a building permit can be issued for that use. That is why this request is coming before you this evening. The request would result in changing the approved site plan, as I mentioned. So this is considered a major change to the Site Plan Review 2005-03, once again, to construct and use additional permanent vehicle parking within the site as shown on the development plans. Once again, 50 new parking stalls are provided, or the applicant wishes to construct. Upon completion of the new parking, a total of 89 permanent parking stalls would be built on the site. The project as conditioned would meet all city code and California building code requirements for parking lots, including accessibility standards for parking and accessibility routes to the trash enclosure, proposed future employee patio area located east of the building, and all accessible entrances. A condition was added by staff to limit to 18 months from the Commission's approval of SPR major change or the completion of the permanent parking spaces, whichever comes first, the temporary parking of vehicles within the new parking area during construction. Proposed and existing landscaping is expected to enhance the parking and traffic ways within the site, complementing the existing and mature landscaping previously installed under the completed phase 1 and phase 2 of the site plan review. And this landscaping would appear to meet the development criteria within the site plan review section 1049G involving parking lot landscaping coverage and shade trees application. An existing site plan review condition required the applicant to plant a ponderosa pine in the northeast corner of the site. There is no evidence that this pine tree was planted. However, the planting of this pine, as well as the proposed trees and shrubs that the applicant is proposing to build and put in place with this new parking lot, it is expected to exceed the 35% native trees and shrub guideline as called for within the City of Placerville's development guide. Now, the applicant did not provide the city with an irrigation plan. A condition was added to require the property owners, prior to the issuance of a construction permit for the new parking lot, to provide a irrigation plan meeting the city's requirements for that purpose, as well as a condition also it requires the recording of a revised landscape maintenance agreement, which was previously recorded for the phases that have been built so far. But due to the modification of the landscape with this request, staff felt it important to record a revised landscape plan to include the plan that would be approved and all other landscape plans that were previously approved by this body. In Exhibit C of staff's report, it contains the previously approved conditions of approval and those requested for tonight's major change request. New conditions are shown as underlined text, and conditions requested for deletion are shown with strikeout text. Now, this back in 2005, again, the 3-building, 4-phase project was approved with a mitigated negative declaration. This document, the mitigated negative declaration, involved mitigation measures, and those were incorporated as conditions of project approval. Those, in principle, have remained and moved forward for your review and to keep tonight as part of tonight's request to the major change to the site. However, there's also a categorical exemption that would apply to this type of project because small parking lots that are accessory to commercial uses are categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to, and they are examples of, what's called a Class 11 categorical exemption under Section 15311B of the CEQA guidelines. This project request was noticed according to state and local posting and publication requirements, and the city received no comments as of this date. Staff recommends the commission conduct a public hearing to receive public comment and consider that comment, and then make findings provided on pages 8 and 9 of staff's report in favor of approval, then conditionally approve the major change request subject to the conditions of approval provided within Exhibit C. The property owner does have a representative this evening, Mr. Wilkinson, and he might be able to answer further questions if you have them.
Thank you, Andrew. Does anybody want to ask the staff any questions now or after public? Okay, great.
I have a question regarding a complete site plan review. This is an amendment, so maybe it doesn't apply, so correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yes, they are requesting to amend the site plan.
the other plans and documents and items that are needed, like the erosion control plan, the fugitive dust plan, the stormwater pollution, is that something that comes through at City Hall directly to staff and doesn't typically come through this body?
Correct. Those are typically a result of the construction drawings that come to the city for review before a permit's issued.
Okay, so for this amendment, basically we just need to see their plan for the parking and the
Correct.
landscaping and such, and city staff will make sure everything else falls in line also.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so best as I can tell from looking at the satellite photos, it looks to me like some number of cars are currently being parked in an unpaved parking lot.
Under a temporary use permit, that's correct.
Okay. So how does the math work out? Do we now have 89 cars being parked in the dirt? Or are we talking about we've got some number X cars being parked in the dirt, and then we're going to pave further and create 50 heretofore non-existing sites, parking places? See, I'm trying to...
Yeah, I appreciate the question. The request is to permanently provide 89 stalls. Upon completion, there will be no temporary parking. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Mike has a question.
Generally, because
along these lines, actually, in 2005 was long ago and far away. So I just want to walk through just briefly. Phase 1 and 2 was simply the construction of the first 5,600 square foot building and the parking lot. That's what phase 1 and 2 was.
grading, construction,
Okay.
required parking, landscaping.
And with that, we got 39 parking spots.
Yes, they provided more parking than was required for that first building.
Okay. And then what is the current number of spots in the temporary?
I don't know if that's a really pertinent point, but I don't have the count. No, I don't have that information in front of me.
Okay. I'll try to bring its relevancy to the table. But in phase 3 was another 5,600 square foot building proposed.
Correct.
Right? And how many parking spots were anticipated as part of phase 3?
There would have been 28 stalls required because 5,600 square foot building in an office-related use, the ratio of parking per square feet is one stall per 200 square feet.
Okay. And then so similarly for phase 4, another 28.
Correct.
Okay. And so we have 39, 28, and 28, correct? So 16, 9, 7.
No, that's not correct.
Oh,
39 were built with the anticipation that phases 3 and 4 would be built.
right. So, okay, so where I'm going with is I want to look at what the total parking would have been under the original approval in 2005.
I think
Right.
we could conclude that it would be 28 times 3.
Okay, so the extra 11 they gave us extra.
Again, the anticipation by the applicant to, if the economy had not fallen off the cliff, perhaps additional buildings would have been built and that parking would have been utilized for that use.
Okay. So then even 28 times 3, that's just under 90, right? We're like 84. Thank you
84.
very much. So if we were to approve the request, the total number of parking for phase 1/2 plus what's being proposed would be a total of
89.
89. So really only 4 spots more than what we approved back in 2005.
I think that's the way the math works, yeah.
All right, because there's no traffic studies here. There's nothing that talks about fewer or less cars and traveling and all that sort of thing. So I was just trying to figure out what our net parking differential was going to be based upon the request.
I see the logic now. Okay.
See, that's what kind of
Yeah.
where it's going. All right, thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to ask the applicant or the applicant's representative to come forward and talk to us a little bit about what they're planning to do here.
Family that owns the parcel there on Brew Road, and I think Andrew pretty well summed up what is and what we're proposing to do as far as a number of new parking stalls going in there. We're trying to bring this the site up to city-approved position so that there aren't going to be any other questions in the future as to the legality of the whole thing. So I don't know if you know, in the past we've got some bad press on this, and basically we're trying to put this one to bed and finalize this in a legal and professional manner, basically, and that's.
Okay, any commissioners have questions of Mr. Wilkinson?
I have a question as to the time frame, 18 months to complete it. Any discussion on making that shorter since it's already been years worth?
Well, the 18 months was actually a number thrown out by by staff, and we feel that's generous. I think in a general, if we went in for a building permit, I think you're generally allowed 2 years on something on a building permit. So we've actually been reduced a little bit from that. But our intention is to get in there this fall and start putting the curbs in. And luckily, all the major grading has been done, so it's just going to be a matter of footings, and then all the hard surface. We're planning on using concrete decking on that, reinforced concrete, as opposed to blacktop. So the disturbance to the site should be very minimal as far as the compaction has all been done, and the site has 5 inches of asphalt base underneath it, compacted at this point anyway. So we're going to try and utilize the existing plane of the site and force water into the existing drain inlets, which go into a water containment system that throttles the amount of water that's allowed to discharge into the adjacent streams. And so we're hoping that it'll be minimal dust and so on and so forth. By using concrete, we'll be able to, number one, do a lot of the labor ourselves, and in 10 days you can get back on the concrete, and then we can open up another section and start doing the preparing the pour for the subsequent pours till we have the whole thing finished up. And then after that, then we'll go ahead and get the landscaping in and try and get the thing completed.
The vehicles that are using the lot now, is there adequate space for them to go while you're?
You know, we've got, we also own the parking lot across the street, and I'm hoping to displace some of the cars from this site on a temporary basis across the street to still accommodate those folks being able to park. But then we can block off just sections in order to get in there with the trucks and the excavator and so forth.
Okay, and then looking at the site, I see how compacted it is, and I'm just kind of concerned about the planting areas. To really be successful, you might need a little jackhammering and get some good soil in those areas.
Probably so, yeah. We haven't hauled any topsoil in there for that, but when you do the planting areas, yeah, we'd haul in a topsoil mix and so forth. And the trees that were planted in there already were excavated out, and we added, landscaping material in when we did those, so.
Okay, and I wanted to just say that the building and the general area is very well maintained. It looks very nice.
Well, thank you.
Good job. Over here, number 6, it says ground cover DG. What is that referring to?
Well, the fellow that I had do the landscape plan, actually, it was kind of a surprise to me, but apparently that is kind of an in way to keep the weed mitigation down for weed control, but apparently it's done.
Was it referring to decomposed granite? Because I use that to keep plants from growing.
Right. Well, apparently you get your plants in there, and the area outside of the planting hole is compacted, decomposed granite, and apparently it's, I know it would be fireproof, but.
Yeah, that's weeds and maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
I have one question. So this is going to replace any further, this will replace any further construction with regards to the original plan for the other two 5,600 square foot buildings. And I presume that the economics just don't suggest there's a need for that level of square footage.
That's exactly right. I think in Sacramento County, there's a vacancy rate in commercials of about 40%. And I don't know what it is in El Dorado County, but we're taking more of a defensive position when it comes to exposure on this kind of a project. So we've decided not to pursue adding any more space to the area.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Wilkinson. We'll ask other members of the public to speak to this issue, and we may ask you to come back.
Very good.
Thank you. So would anybody else care to speak to this application?
My concern is I live right.
Your name, sir?
Jesse
And last name?
Tamburini.
Thank you.
My property butts up to the county, and I'm having a hard time figuring out exactly where the parking lot's going, if it's coming more into our property, or I know the little temporary that they put there, which is not a problem to me now, but if they go beyond there, it's pretty much coming more into my yard, in a sense. So I'm just having a hard time figuring. I haven't seen any. I don't know where it's going. So.
Okay, well, I don't think that we're talking about anything that's going to encroach across onto your property line.
Well, I'm just thinking more about lights, more lighting coming through, parking lot lighting.
I see.
The people that are going there. I have little kids. The county never attracts the best of people, So that's my concern, because we have bums up and down all day long through our neighborhood, so.
Well, as I understand the application, the existing 3 light standards are going to continue to be in place.
That's correct.
Is that correct? And so those light standards, as they have existed, will not change the lighting infill onto your property any more than it already exists.
Okay. So, and then also, another concern was, instead of maybe putting a parking lot, more parking is, how about like a sidewalk that people could walk up and down this road? Because, you know, as us driving in and out, we have people all over that road, and there's no proper sidewalk for people to walk from the bus stop up to the county office. So I just think maybe better money could be spent in like proper safety walkways coming up there instead of employee parking. That's a big parking lot.
No, but I will want to ask staff about that when we close the public hearing. Thank you.
That's
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much for your
Thank you.
input.
My name is Tom Ramos, and I'm concerned with the infrastructure of Brew Road. Jesse there mentioned sidewalks. We have people from social services, county employment, walking up and down the street, 2, 3 abreast. We have to stop. They won't move. There's a strip of sidewalk in front of the social services. That's it. And then from the old Midas Muffler, there's a strip of sidewalk that goes to Forney Road. Also, we have had a dickens of a time. We're talking about having a hard time with our neighbors, the commercials, with trash. 3:45 in the morning, this guy comes around, picks up the dumpsters and bangs them, and then leaves. This is in the summer. In the winter, he's a little later, probably 4 o'clock. Also, we have had problems with people going right to the stop signs, turning right off of Forney because they're late for work or they're late for an appointment. Another problem we're having is extreme towing. They have a yard there. The street is properly posted, no parking, but the man parks on the street, gets off, walks over to the gate, and we're lucky if there's nobody that comes up to him from the yard and starts talking. That truck stays there. If they can move that gate back 60 feet so he can pull in, dismount and open the gate, that would really work. That would help us out. Because our quality of life there has really gone down. And we understand we have commercial people, the county needs places to work, but they have to cooperate with us too. So please, I ask you, help us out on this issue. That's all I ask.
Thank you very much for your input,
You're
sir.
welcome.
Does anyone have any further questions for Mr. Wilkinson? Nope. Okay, so can we get back in conversation now with staff? And I take it you have some questions to direct to staff, Mike?
Well, yeah, I want I want to start with the sidewalks because we've always had an emphasis on trying to construct sidewalks with new construction, and I don't recall what the conditions for sidewalks were when this project was originally approved. Although, have we formally closed public hearing?
We have at this time.
Oh, thank you. So what is the situation, the requirement for sidewalks with this project? And specifically now with regards to phases 3 and 4?
A visit to the site would provide the viewer that the applicant and their property has curb, gutter, and sidewalk installed.
But that
Per
was
code.
that was just the phase 1, was it not?
That's a requirement of this site plan review, so it was a component that's been completed.
I'm sorry, I thought there might have been additional curb, sidewalk, and gutter required for 3 and 4.
No.
They're
They're required to provide street frontage improvements, and that has been met.
Okay, yeah, all right. With regards to the landscape plan, no revised landscape plan has been submitted. We have some drawings, and in the staff report it talks, one of the conditions it talks about they're going to submit an amended. I guess my question to the commission, and particularly to Les, is if you had a chance to look at what the selection was, and was there adequate coverage, and I saw a lot of asphalt there, and was there enough canopy, perhaps? Okay, well, I won't delve into that too much further. One of the members of the public brought up the whole issue as the quality of life, and I don't know that this project is specifically. Let me back up. The traffic impact, I don't know, is going to change with this project over what's currently there or what was already approved, because we're really not adding any additional spaces.
Correct.
At the same time, and I refer back to the Chief of Police reports dated December 19, 2013 from the previous item, just in the first paragraph, where he talks about a negative impact on the quality of life of local residents and businesses. And certainly the city takes quality of life for our residents to be very important. And I'm just wondering what it is that we might be able to do to improve the situation on Brew Road related to this project in terms of addressing some of the concerns that were raised in the public testimony.
Yeah, if I can respond to that. I think staff is limited to applying conditions of approval that are, I would say, germane to the conversion of a temporary gravel parking lot to a permanent parking lot. And so I took notes of what the speaker was saying, and if there's a parking issue or people are parking illegally on the street, I can certainly pass that along to the chief of police, and maybe they can run a car there and write a citation kind of thing. As far as extreme towing, not being a good neighbor, there's not a whole lot that the city could do unless they're, breaking a city ordinance or something like that we're able to enforce. But that, I think some of those issues that have been mentioned, the homeless people walking down the street and that nature, really is not something that this parking lot is going to be able to fix.
Thank you. I'll wait to hear what Commissioner Russell has to say about landscaping.
This is sort of a technical, maybe cleanup thing, but condition number 23 on page 5, Roman numeral 5, says that the paving will be 3 inches of asphalt, over base material, and the applicant has said that they're going to use concrete, so that might be changed to reflect actually what's going to happen. I'm sure you've got.
Would you like me to comment?
No, well, it says they're going to use asphalt, but they say they're going to use concrete.
I think we want to keep that in there just in case the applicant changes their mind, and we have that standard already in place.
Well, you should have the specs for concrete then, the thickness and everything. So maybe you ought to add to that or if it's going to be concrete, the specs for that.
Thank you very much. This request would go to our city engineer for their comment, and those provisions, I'm sure, would make part of their review.
Yeah, if staff could just make one other brief comment to that. Basically speaking, I think that original condition of approval on the project for construction of their parking lots is the minimum standard. So if the applicant decides that they want to do, concrete, cement, parking lot as opposed to asphalt concrete, they can certainly do that. But of course, it would have to meet the required specifications per our engineering division. But I think what this is reflecting is the minimum standard, and the applicant wants to do, a higher standard improvement.
Okay, fine. I do have a couple of comments about the landscape, and I've always think that trees that are going to go in a parking lot should, be trees that attain some stature and provide some shade, and in addition to, just looking good. You've chosen, your landscape person, whoever that is, has chosen what's called a foothill ash, for I think there's 8 or 9 or 10 trees that go down through the parking lot itself. I'd really like to see you change that to something else. And I'm going to read a little bit from what the Sunset Garden book says about foothill ash. And it describes it as a tree-like shrub or small tree. And that's not what we want in a parking lot. We need something with some canopy and some silhouette and that'll provide shade. I've got what's described as the approved street trees for the city of Placerville, and I'd like to give you this before you leave, and perhaps you could pick one of these trees that would be more appropriate for a parking lot situation. The other comment that the garden book says or has is that it flowers in March, June, followed by many 1-inch long fruits. And believe me, trees that have lots of fruit really aren't very good for situations where you have parking. It falls on the cars and people are going to be very upset. And so, again, I think if you could pick one of these trees off the street tree list, you'd be probably eliminate problems in the future, you know. I see one of the conditions is that you're going to plant you're going to be required to plant the missing pine tree at the northeast corner of the lot. And that whole end of your project is just sort of open. There's not much there. I would really like to see, and maybe we can make it a condition and add it to the landscape plan, that at least 3 more ponderosa pines are planted along that eastern boundary. And that would sort of close that end, and you've got landscaping on the north side, on the south side, and some at the west side. So I think that would kind of finish it off. So hopefully we can add that as a condition. Yeah.
I have a technical question for you then. They do have their storm drain piping going through the northeast corner. Would a mature ponderosa interfere with that too much?
Well, I'm not sure how massive that is. I don't know, you know, but you know, I think there's room for another 3 trees, and in addition to the one that they should plant.
Okay.
So the biggest thing is to change from those foothills ash to another tree. I think you'd be way far ahead if you do that, and I don't think that's going to negate the percentage for native plants, because some of your ground covers and whatnot are also natives, and you still have the oak trees that are on the north side. So I think you'll be okay in that respect. That's pretty much my comments.
I'd like to ask Les a couple of questions, if possible. So, and I'm looking at the landscaping diagram that calls these out. So some of these, the quercus, I know what that is. Is the ash the fraxinus?
That's the one
That's the ash, right?
They change. Yes.
Yeah, correct. The spirea and the Molenbergia and the Huerca corabels, those are all shrubs, right?
Shrubs and ground covers.
Shrubs and ground cover, but not trees.
Grass, you know, one's
Yeah.
a grassy.
Okay, that's what I thought.
They're all fine.
Yeah, great. So, my look at this, my opinion of this is way under canopied. There should be a whole lot more tree cover in this lot. And there were going to be buildings here originally, now we're going to have all parking. And particularly on this whole southeast aspect, I mean, I just think there should be a lot more.
There are trees there now. They're not shown on this plan, but they were planted previously when the building was built, I believe.
But they're not
I had
required,
this-
they're part of the landscape, the original landscape plan?
Yeah.
Oh.
I had the same thought before I
Okay.
went up there to look at the site, and I thought those bulb outs could take trees, but there's trees in several of them, so I
Okay.
think that's pretty well taken care of.
And what about in our center row here? I mean,
Well,
I
that's
get
where-
so concerned about That's where the ash were planted. I don't want any ash, and I agree with your comments on that.
Well, if they put a bigger tree that has a bigger silhouette and a bigger canopy, I think we'll be okay. You know. That strip isn't very wide, so they kinda
Right.
had to stick those in where it widens out.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I have a question. Is the ash that they were proposing on the approved tree list?
It's actually
Yes, it is.
classified as a native tree. That's why they call it foothill ash. But it's just not a very desirable tree. If the garden book says it's a large shrub, you know?
Well, then, would we want to consider leaving it open for them to choose from the approved list, or start to tell them 3 or 4 choices?
No, I was gonna hopefully give them this street tree list and have them pick one of these if they would. You know, these are all trees that would do well in a parking lot situation, you know.
We should move this along because everyone is obviously here for item 7.3.
Well, unless there are any more questions of staff, I guess we can move forward to call a question. Les has added a number of additional conditions to this, and I'm hoping that you've captured those to your satisfaction during his narrative.
Well, technically, we don't have a motion on the table.
Right. No, I understand that, but if left to my own devices, I'm going to propose vote yea or nay without any codicils. So if we want to do something other than that,
Well, instead of making this, you know, too onerous, I would hope that the applicant could work with staff and pick a tree from this for the parking lot and have them figure this out. It doesn't have to come back here. It doesn't have to be a condition necessarily. But I would like the 3 additional pine trees at the east end of the parking lot, if that's concurred with the rest of the board here.
To clarify, that's 3 in addition to the 1 that was previously. Thank you.
The same species as mentioned in the conditions, right? Okay.
This is an easy motion to make. I would suggest the newest member can just jump right in there and go for it.
Can staff raise a point of order? It was raised by Director Rivas that due to the specificity of Member Russell's requirement that we have 3 additional ones, perhaps that should be made part of the condition of approval.
Would concur that these should be in the motion, so.
Yes, correct. Thank you.
In regards to the noise of the dumpster that was brought up, the dumpster emptying, I'm noticing there's multiple smaller dumpsters on site. And what is staff's opinion of the feasibility of one large dumpster? So there's just one big bang instead of bang, bang, bang. Perhaps where, I don't know if a dumpster has to be within a given distance of a building, but where those cargo containers currently are.
I'd leave that up to the commission to determine.
Okay, so there's no standards that
Well, I believe it's city code that all entities, all residential uses within the city and commercial have to have garbage pickup. That's the requirement.
I think the issue is 3 a.m.
Right.
I think that's the fundamental problem. Why in the heck are we
Well,
picking up garbage at 3
They
o'clock
come by
in the
my
morning?
house at about 4:45, so I can concur somewhat, but
that's because they don't want them out there during rush hour.
that's potentially the issue, yeah.
I don't know if the applicant could speak to a best location for one big dumpster. Is it possible to?
On our site, we have 1 dumpster for garbage, and then there's a recycle dumpster, which is for all the recycled stuff. So they come at different times. I think the recycle people come in there maybe every 2 weeks to empty that, and then of course the garbage company's there once a week. I think they show up on Wednesdays for that. So that what you see is kind of is what we have to have as far as meeting the requirements for,
Yeah, if that's the question, yeah, they've met that intent by having those refuge collection devices on site.
And my impression of the person making those comments is he was describing that and a constellation of other problems, which, well, we really started talking about a number of other sources of things he didn't like in the neighborhood. I think my impression, he's concerned that 6 or 8 dumpsters go bang in the morning. You know, the Wilkinson property is really not a significant component of that. It's the impression I have.
Yeah, I think it's fairly obvious if you've been up to that part of town. The Wilkinsons, as Barry mentioned earlier, their family owns the apartments. They have a dumpster or associated dumpsters with that facility. The building containing the Forest Service, they've got a dumpster there. The county building, not owned by the county, but occupied by the county to the south of this location, they have a dumpster. So, as well as the single-family homes that are at the very end of the road that are actually not in the city. So yes, there will be traffic and there will be garbage pickup, and yes, they do make noise. I think that's abundantly clear.
Okay, well, Mike, would you be, I would say Mike Earl, Mike, would you be willing to craft a motion that includes these additions with regard to additional plantings? As I understand it, we have a hard requirement for a total of 4 ponderosa pines, and
I think it's an additional 3 plus the one that was required from the original approval.
okay, that's
yeah.
like 4, right?
Which would be a total, but we're not for, I mean, we're reiterating the original requirement.
Okay.
Yep, okay, fair enough, we're
3 and 2, 4 and 1, whatever.
You want my help or not?
Yeah. Okay.
And then also, that the applicant could work with staff for a suitable substitution to the ash. Those are the 2. Was there anything else? So I'll move the recommendation that we make the findings for the major change to Site Plan Review 2005-03 with the findings that are stated in the staff report 1 through 6, and will conditionally approve the major change as stated in the staff report to include condition 3, number 1, I believe, which would be the addition of 3 ponderosa pines. What? On the eastern border of the property, in addition to the pine tree that was required in the original approval, though we had a total of 4. And then condition Roman numeral 3, number 2, the applicant will work with staff to find a suitable substitution for the ash trees which were proposed.
Second.
Offer a friendly amendment.
We'll see.
Condition number 36, strike the language "if the area is available for it" in regards to planting the ponderosa. It's given as an option, not as a requirement.
I'm sorry, what you why don't I have these in my application? Bear with me.
Under Roman numeral 7 of the conditions of approval, item 36 addresses the pondo pine in the area in the northeast corner.
I'm sorry, apologies, I hadn't gone far enough. So my motion may be deficient.
I would just request that condition number 36, friendly amendment, if the, strike the language regarding the planting of the ponderosa, strike "if the area is available for it," and add to condition 36, plant an additional 3 Pinus ponderosa on the east property line.
All right, so I guess point of order is these conditions were from the original approval. That's what Commissioner Drobich is referring to.
So for clarification for staff then, are you looking at actually, if space is available for it, planting 4 ponderosa pines in the northeast corner?
Yes, not in the corner, along the boundary.
Yeah, so my point of order question, frankly, is dealing with, I guess it's within our purview to modify conditions that were originally stipulated on the application back in 2005. We can do that.
Yes.
Yes.
Any conditions that are pertinent to the parking lot, you can certainly
And 36
modify.
might be the appropriate condition to add additional pine trees.
All right, so the friendly amendment, okay, understanding that, what I'd like to do with that, so under Roman numeral 3, condition 3, what I would say something along the lines of striking former item number 36, right? We're going to strike that entirely? Is that what you want to do? You want to strike number 36, right?
No, I just want to take the option out.
You want to strike the, if the area is available for it.
Correct.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of the best way to formulate that. So in the motion, refresh my memory in the motion that I've made in Roman numeral 3. It's Roman numeral 3, number 1 deals with the ponderosa pines, correct? That's in my motion I made. Roman numeral 3 in your staff report. When I made my motion, I added a condition under Roman numeral 3. Condition 1, I think, was 3 additional ponderosa pine on the easterly border, in addition to the ponderosa pine that was required from the original application. Okay, so Commissioner Drobich, I believe, would like to amend that to also include striking from the original application the language in item 36 that says if the area is available for it, for those trees, okay? And if that's his amendment, then I will accept that friendly amendment.
If staff can make a recommendation, I think it would be a lot easier for staff if there was an additional standalone condition that captured some of those other modifications you made to the landscaping plan besides the slight modification made to the existing condition 36 regarding the single ponderosa pine. And I tried to craft something, so I'm going to go ahead and read it to you, and feel free to adjust it accordingly. And same with maybe the city planner may have a opinion on it as well, but I'm just trying to make it easier for the applicant and for staff. The applicant shall submit a revised landscaping plan to the planning division subject to review and approval. Said revised plan shall show the planting of 3 additional ponderosa pines along the, is that north boundary?
I think it's easterly.
Northeast boundary of the site.
East boundary.
East boundary. Along the east boundary of the site, and replace the foothill ash with a substitute tree.
That's correct. But the issue is that Mr. Drobich is raising is way back in condition 36 from the original 2005 application. There's a clause in here that says if the area is available for it, and he wants to strike that. And I concur with that.
Yes.
So
I think
also
he captured that, yeah.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
What I did here was craft an additional condition of approval that we'll add. So it'll be condition of approval number,
Well, those numbers are likely to change, but
but it'll follow condition
38.
37 or 38. It'll be a condition added on.
How are we
So-
striking, though, the clause in the existing 36 if the area is available for it? How's that being struck?
the language that was requested by Member Drobich to strike was after the words ponderosa pine, between the comma and the subsequent comma. So the words, if the area is available for it, I believe that's what was requested to be struck.
Right. Okay, so my gibbering was immaterial. So actually the amendment is simply just to strike that and just leave it as is. All right, so you need to, I didn't need to say anything, you just need to, I accept the friendly amendment, just needs a second.
Are we ready to take a vote?
You need to second the friendly amendment. And then we need
I
to take,
second the friendly amendment.
and then we need to add Pierre's language, correct? Is that,
Correct.
so the,
Want to read that again?
I'll accept your proposed language as a friendly amendment,
Okay, so what
which
we're about,
requires a second.
would you like another second?
You, his motion would like another second,
Okay.
otherwise it's, the applicant's not
Come
on
John,
the hook
second the
for it.
motion. Quit fooling around.
There were two
Okay,
two
John, you got a
amendments.
second.
No, you seconded the original motion, correct? Who seconded my motion?
Oh, I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to second all the amendments.
I second all the amendments.
So noted.
Boy.
I know you can lead a horse to water. I get that, Mike. I understand your pain.
I'm just, it becomes a legal issue at the end of the day if we want to hold the applicant accountable, so.
Okay, I'd like to
Roll
hold
call.
a roll call vote on the motion in front of the,
Member Friend,
Aye.
Vice Chair Lowry, excuse me, Chair Lowry, pardon the immediate,
okay, I know what you're saying. Aye.
Vice Chair Drobish,
Aye.
Member List. Aye. Member Russell. Aye. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'm ready when you are.
And we're back. Our next item, back to the numbers here. Item 7.3, supportive and transitional housing, zone change 2014-03. This application is a City of Placerville project request regarding proposed text amendments, zone change 2014-03 to the city zoning code. The project would implement portions of the 2013-2021 housing element by providing definitions and regulations to allow the establishment of transitional housing and supportive housing termed a residential service facility under the zoning code. The Planning Commission is to consider and make recommendations to the City Council regarding proposed draft ordinances that would amend the city zoning code and to consider staff's determination that ZC 2014-03 is categorically exempt from environmental review pursuant to Section 15061B3 of the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines. Mr. Painter.
Yeah, this was staff's intent at the last meeting to consider this request. However, recent changes to the government code as part of what was called Senate Bill 745, which went into effect on January 1st of this year, amended or actually replaced the health and safety code definitions for, quote, supportive housing and, quote, transitional housing. Now, the city utilized those definitions when it changed the zoning code in 2013 in response to a housing element program for Cycle 4. So the city needed additional time to make those changes to tonight's review of the ordinance that we're requesting that you provide a recommendation on to City Council. And So in terms of the city has an adopted and certified housing element, and briefly, there are implementation programs that are part of the strategy to reduce potential constraints to the maintenance, development, and improvement of housing within the housing elements, 8-year planning period. As you remember at the last meeting, there were 2 other amendments to city code, the zoning ordinance, related to single room occupancy units and employee housing. And tonight again is the review for Program 8, the implementation of Program 8, which again is transitional and supportive housing. That Program 8 requires the city ordinance to be amended to comply with California housing law to permit transitional and supportive housing as residential uses within the Placerville's mixed-use zones. And these zones are Business Professional, or BP, the Central Business District, which is where this building's located, and that's abbreviated as CBD. The Commercial Zone, which is most of the Placerville Drive corridor, as well as the portion of Main Street between more or less the Druid Monument and where Broadway and Main Street come together. And Convenience Commercial, we have no current properties that are zoned that, but it does allow for residential uses, as well as the Highway Commercial Zone, which is predominantly in the the Broadway corridor, as well as the Placerville Drive corridor. Now, under state housing law, transitional housing and supportive housing are permitted as residential uses and only subject to those restrictions that apply to other residential dwellings of the same type in the same zone, and that's Government Code 65583, subsection A, number 5, for those keeping score. The city partially complies with this state law in that we provide the ability to construct and use transitional and supportive housing within our single-family and multifamily zones. In the city's change of our code in 2013, we made transitional and supportive housing a sub-characteristic or subcomponent of the community care facility. And those definitions, the current definitions and the proposed definitions, are in your staff report for your review. Upon looking at further the January 1st, 2014 Senate Bill 745 amendments, there was an inclusion of the word, a target population. And that term was not defined in our previous housing element, and I think that's important because that particular term is used in the definition of supportive housing. And if I recall correctly, I think during many years ago, I just have this memory of just as an aside, I believe it was member friend that had a question about what is that term and how it's defined. So here you go. We've added that definition into the code, and which should help future uses and future people who want to establish this type of use in the city, that definition's provided. There is no change necessary in the zoning ordinance for the definition of supportive housing. It matches the 2014 government code changes. And no proposed changes are on the board here for the definition of community care facility, where once again transitional and supportive housing uses remain categorized under what's called residential service facility. Now, to implement the Program 8, the draft ordinance, which is made part of your staff report tonight, would add the residential service facility use as a permitted use within each of the city's mixed-use zones, subject only to those restrictions imposed upon other residential uses within the same zone. The program, when implemented, Program 8, would assist the city in meeting its housing element Goal B and Policy 1 of Goal B, which requires the city to allow transitional housing and supportive housing in appropriate zoning districts to be consistent with California law. In that there is no possibility that the text amendments in question may have a significant effect on the environment, this activity is not subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, Therefore, this project is exempt pursuant to Section 15061, subsection B3 of the CEQA guidelines. Based on our crowd this evening, this project was indeed noticed according to our local code as well as state law. The city received no public comment. Staff recommends the commission conduct a public hearing amongst the people gathered here tonight to consider public comment and regarding the zone change request, make the findings that the request is categorically exempt from environmental review, and recommend to City Council to adopt the text amendments to the City Code as shown in the draft ordinance provided as Exhibit A to allow for transitional housing and supportive housing, again, once again, residential service facility use within the zoning districts that permit residential uses consistent with state law. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Painter. So I think at this point we can take it as read that the public hearing opportunity has been offered and lapsed.
Correct.
So that brings us to the actions number 2 and 3, and I imagine commission members may have some questions of you regarding those 2 elements.
I have a question. Would it be possible for the city to, instead of referencing residential service facility, just to keep it community care facility and therefore reduce the number of zones that this can go into, or would state law still trump it? It has to go anywhere residential is allowed.
You just surmised what state law requires.
But in, correct me if I'm wrong, in a lot of the commercial zones, it's not a by right on the list. It's more of a secondary right by CUP or in some of them.
Residential uses in, let's say, the CBD, this zone here, the way the code currently reads, you can have residential uses when they're above or below the ground floor. It does not specify necessarily a particular residential use. So therefore, under state statute, that would be implied to mean transitional and supportive housing. If you have 6 or fewer residents within a transitional or supportive housing, the city code, state law, and city code and state law would require that be considered a residential use as if it's a single family use, whether it's on my street of Acacia, whether it's on Elm Street, whether it's on Wiltsey, within residential zones.
Okay, thank you. Is there, you just triggered something about the SROs from last meeting. Is there any language in here I might have missed that addresses over 6 units?
Well, under the community care facility use, if you have 7 or more within city code, it would require a use permit.
Okay.
So it is covered.
So,
And that's another reason why to have it under the definition of a subcomponent of community care facility, because we've got that covered in terms of the number of units.
Okay, so 6 and under, really no say whatsoever from the city.
It's treated as just another residential use, only subject to those regulations that would apply to other residential uses of similar nature.
Okay,
in
and
that
a
zone.
brand new building would probably go under site plan review, and they would, these transitional, if somebody was to build a brand new building, they would have to go under site plan review typically?
Yes and no.
Okay.
My example before, let's say there was a vacant lot on Acacia, and it was a single-family home. The only building they could build would be a single-family home. Within that home, they could have as many as 6 transitional or supportive occupants.
Okay.
If it was a multi-tenant building in a zoning district that permitted that, then our code would provide for site plan review for that type of facility where applicable.
I would like staff's, I think you already have it in your staff report on the CEQA finding that the text amendments have no potential, no possibility for significant environmental effects, but when the zoning gets changed, all of this can be done by right, and there never is CEQA review. Therefore, kind of in my mind, I don't know what the potential impacts are because
Yeah, I think the answer is it's too speculative for staff to make that categorical conclusion that it would apply in all cases. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think it's too speculative for us to state that a project will or will not violate or cause an environmental impact until something is proposed
okay, I just have a problem
for the city to review.
being asked to make a finding, a determination, that I feel there will be no possibility for significant environmental effects. And
The actual changing of the text will not cause an environmental impact.
but once the text is changed, then it just goes forward at the counter at City Hall. Doesn't come back here for any kind of review.
Where those projects that deem it, yes, it would.
If staff could further make a comment on that point. I think Commissioner Drobish, you were referring to where it would be allowed by right in those zones. Well, since state law is basically stating that if it's 6 persons or fewer, it's to be treated the same as a residential use. Therefore, there is no change from respect of the by right portion, but where if it's 7 or more, then it's discretionary through the conditional use permit process. Therefore, there would be a CEQA document done on a case-by-case basis for those projects.
Specifically in the ordinance itself, for staff under section 3, under definition of target population, it's the entire underlined section there. First, I believe there's a typo in the very last sentence. Third word, individuals existing, I think, is probably supposed to be exiting from institutional settings, as opposed to individuals existing from institutional settings. See where I'm talking about? In the so section 3 of the ordinance itself, in the definition of target population, it's all underlined.
Yeah, exiting would be the appropriate word. Thank you.
Okay. Now, that's an easy fix. Target population means persons with low incomes. Okay, fair enough. Should we not have some sort of threshold? Is this definition given to us by the state that we just have to adopt?
Yes, it is.
Oh,
we
so
don't we don't have to adopt it, but as far as its clarity with our use of that term in the definition of supportive housing, we think it's imperative to include at this time.
No, well, I'm not challenging. Low income in and of itself is just a relative term. And it just seems to me it should be tied to something like percent above poverty level or something along those lines, as opposed to simply saying persons with low incomes. Because that seems fairly broad and arbitrary.
Right. I mean, I agree with Mike. The term needs to have some traceability to a standard. Low income, what does it mean? And it may already, in the context of the whole document, low income may mean 120% or whatever the number is of the poverty level.
Because I actually, in the context, so we have persons with low incomes, and does the low incomes translate across all the subsequent groups? For example, because otherwise I could look at families with children, and so I assume it has to be families with children who have a low income, so it's got to be relative to something.
Yeah, the other thing that occurs to me, Mike, is that the determination of low income may take place external to this language, is that somebody would come under this language because they have been deemed low income based upon the standards of the place and the time.
Fair enough, but then there's some official designation like the 49 occupancy.
Right.
So, but do you see what I'm saying?
The state housing element law does define these terms, and
Okay.
we have utilized many, or if not most of those terms as part of our housing element update. And so those types of definitions are included in there,
Okay, so
which would help a reader to to wade through it as to what truly is a low-income group or household.
So it would be the city's position that low incomes as proposed in this is a resolution, right? Ordinance, as proposed in this ordinance, that the definition would be as already defined, as you just described. Is it right?
I think it's hard to speak for what, moved the legislature to adopt this statute, but I think that the general nature of the language that's in here is to characterize the people that need supportive services, not necessarily the percent of income as it relates to the median income of a county or a city. Perhaps we're wading into the minutia, but
perhaps. However, with the exception of low income, every single one of these is fairly precise. Individuals exiting from institutional settings, veterans, homeless people, those are all AIDS. Those are all fairly objective. And the only one that strikes me as being fairly subjective is the low income. And I'm simply asking, can we not tie it to a tighter definition? And I believe you said something, Andrew, about, well, we already have it defined in our housing elements, right?
Yes, low income is defined.
Okay.
Medium income is defined.
So I'm simply saying, can we somehow
Above
tie
moderate.
this to those definitions? I mean, it could be something as simple as low incomes as defined in the city's housing element, however you want to do it. I'm simply making the observation that this one stands out as opposed to every other item in here as being the only one that's really subjective.
I won't speak for the Director Rivas, but I think your suggestion that you tie it to the housing element would be more than adequate.
And that makes
A
it
simple
traceable.
phrase.
Yeah, and that makes it traceable as the chairman was suggesting.
I guess the only question I would have, and I would refer back to Mr. Painter, is that is low incomes, if it's meant to be just a target, then it's a target and not something that is substantive in terms of it can't be maybe even, within the median income or something else.
I think I see your point.
It's the specificity, I think, maybe we don't want to go in that direction because this language here is not meant to be that specific. And if we do get specific, then again, do we define what a disability is? Do we define what a mental illness is? Or do we define when somebody has actual substance abuse or a chronic health condition? I'm not sure
or
what
who
a
are
definition
elderly
of a
people.
chronic health condition is. So
Yeah.
it's sort of like in our previous discussion on another item, you don't want to attach the entire building code to a condition for use permit. The same thing here. We don't want to attach the entire housing element or some other, something that's much more specific. I think this is a target population, meaning we're just targeting persons with low incomes, and I think that's more of a general statement than something that's saying, well, it's below 80% of the median income of El Dorado County kind of thing. So my suggestion is we leave it alone.
I have a question. Is the definition of the target population, that language there, that is not required by state law? It's just a definition they have?
It's a definition, as the staff report indicates, that the Health and Safety Code utilize these definitions or slightly modified definitions.
So
The legislature felt compelled to codify, for lack of a better word, these definitions into the housing element law, so that there would be no loss of specificity as to how and how these terms are defined in the context of the housing element law. So I think that's the purpose of why the legislature did this. But to answer your question, is it required that the city impose this particular definition? I would say no. But to assist those in understanding what the words target population as used in the supportive housing definition, it's important to include this language in staff's opinion so that the reader will understand what is a target population.
Goes back to the traceability.
Yeah.
But I always rely on some official definition of something. I don't create my own definition of a Voltern home, for instance.
So we are not precluded from adding to or taking from this definition of target population. I agree that we could keep it broad to help us. This is basically to help us meet our RENA numbers, right? So we don't want to reduce it to a category where our numbers are limited. If it's open-ended, something to the effect of target population including but not limited to low income, status of income, disability. It's broad enough to benefit the moderate income and the low income and those without disabilities.
I apologize. I wasn't expecting that to be I thought that was a comment, but
We could change this
you characterize it that way.
language that follows the definition of target population, correct?
What staff is requesting this body to do is to provide a recommendation to City Council as to what we've provided or as amended or recommended for amendments by the Planning Commission.
Okay, well then I would suggest target population means persons including but not limited to those with low or moderate incomes and or who have one or more disabilities.
I think we're going to need some language in a motion to make any changes to this proposed ordinance. So.
Just thinking out loud here, since this is discussion. Apparently there is some concern by the members about the term low incomes and how it may apply with the other list of populations that are written. Perhaps from staff's perspective, maybe it's not apparent that low incomes actually be included in this definition. Would that assist the members by not specifying incomes at all? But a target population could be persons with one or more disabilities, mental illness, AIDS or HIV. They could also include people of low income. I think that's really the intent. It could be they could be elderly persons. I could go through the list. I kind of get back to what Director Rivas said, that low incomes is I'm not sure, well, perhaps that those two words may not be as needed in this definition.
So my understanding of our remit as Planning Commission is to move some language forward for City Council to evaluate and debate and apply their wisdom in the fullness of time.
Yes.
So what I'm looking for is something that stays between the left and the right lines and no gross misstatements of fact. Now, I may be leaning back on my 25 years as a civil servant, but I'm quite happy to have the City Council review this language to the satisfaction of the City Council and those who choose to attend the public hearing on this matter. So I'm just stating I'm leaning towards moving this item along and getting the City Council to get their teeth into it. I mean, if there's a constituency on the City Council that wants language changes made, I think that's a great place to do it.
Well, we are tasked to make recommendations to council, mine would be in this target population to be, target population means persons including but not limited to those with lower incomes, because low income is an actual category and there's extremely low. So you don't want to specifically choose a category. So just lower incomes and or those who have one or more disabilities, on and on. If somebody wanted to make a motion.
So you would simply change low to lower, basically, at the end of the day. I'm wore out from
Are you
the
making a
church
motion,
fight.
Mike?
I'm wore out from the church fight. I'm
Okay.
just trying to get motivated.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're gonna change, exiting doesn't need a motion, that's just a simple typo. All right.
That was our mistake.
So for clarification, if
Yeah,
staff could just read that back.
I would move the staff recommendation that, I would move that this body recommend the council adopt the ordinance as written, with the only modification being changing low, the word low to lower in the target population definition, and correcting existing to exiting as previously mentioned.
I second.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I'm assuming from the motion that findings are included.
I'm sorry, you know, I didn't understand that we had to adopt findings because we're simply making a recommendation
Again, you're
to
making
council, but you're right.
recommendations on the
We
findings.
do need, I guess we do need to make the finding. So I'll amend my motion to include that, notice that we conducted the public hearing and made the findings that the request is categorically exempt from 15061B3 of CEQA. Is that satisfactory?
Correct, thank you.
If we get an amendment, second to the amendment, that would be helpful.
I second.
Okay, so if I understand the motion as amended, as said, we're making the finding, and we're recommending to City Council to adopt the text amendments with the textual modification that Member Frem has proposed.
That's what staff
Okay.
received,
Okay.
yes. Great.
So I guess we're ready for a roll call vote. Is that?
Unless there's further discussion, no? Member Friend,
Aye.
Member List,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Vice Chair Drobish,
Abstain.
Member Lowry.
No.
Good work by staff, though.
Would the commissioners or staff like to bring forward any comments or reports for items not on the agenda today?
Yeah, briefly, there will be two items at this point on the June 3rd meeting. And one of them involves a conditional use permit request for a 10-bed residential care facility
Awesome.
on a property on Columbus Street. The second item will be a site plan review involving a minor alteration to an existing residence located within the Bedford Clay Streets Historic Residential District.
Any further reports or comments from staff or commission? Okay. Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Aye. Adjourn. Got to use that thing.